Hello and welcome to Promoting Positive Behaviour and Positive Behaviour Support. My name is Andrew Whitehouse and I'll be delivering this module for you today. You can be in touch with me at Facebook if you look for Andrew Whitehouse at People First Education. You can look for me on Twitter at AndrewWSEN. You can find me on Instagram also at AndrewWSEN, and you can find me at LinkedIn. There's a few Andrew Whitehouses up there, but I'm sure you'll spot me. And if you want to email me, it's andrew@peoplefirsteducation.com. And there's even an online contact form on my website at peoplefirsteducation.com. So lots and lots of ways to be in touch with me, which is good because there's going to be lots of information on this workshop for you to look into. And it may well bring up more questions than answers, as often training does. So, who am I? Well, I'm a TEDx speaker. As of today, I've delivered three TEDx events, one formal TEDx talk, and then two lockdown conversations on TEDx. So you can check me out on there. My main TEDx is called From Disability to Superpowers. I think you quite enjoy that. It looks at things that people with neurological diversities can do that people without neurological diversities probably can't do. So again, quite a lot to be going on there. I'm also a special educational needs and disability trainer at Bishop Grosseteste University, and I deliver short courses there, as I do also at the University of Lincoln. I'm a Bamford lecturer for the British Academy of Audiology, and I was due to be delivering another BAA lecture this year, but unfortunately due to the crisis, that and many other conferences that I'm due to have been appearing at this year have been cancelled, postponed, etc. But I do have a very wide conference portfolio. I've got multiple UK and overseas contracts for SEN training, and my SEN training covers actual training like this, or in-person training. You know, you come to a hotel or something like that and have a curly sandwich and a cup of coffee, and we spend the day looking at things. Interventions in the classroom such as observing teaching groups, individual children, groups of individuals, the whole school sometimes. So lots to be thinking about there. And then again, lots and lots of conferences. But the stuff I suspect you're more interested in is the boots on the ground stuff that I do, the interventions that I do. So here's a little quote that I like. I'm quoting myself here. This is one of my moments of, I had a magnificent moment of apathy on a train once, and I had this idea and I thought, oh my gosh, I've really got to write this down. So what I did, I put this down, and I think I've been using this for years now, this same quote. It's really powerful. Behaviour management is not about dealing with issues as they arise. Behaviour management is about avoiding those issues in the first place. If you deal with those incidents as they arise, you will not reduce the number of incidents. If you avoid the incidents by understanding the triggers and the impairments, you will significantly reduce challenging behaviour. What do I mean there? I'll tell you exactly what I mean. What I'm trying to say to you is, you know what annoys people, you know what bothers people, you know what triggers people off. Little things bother me, and so if you want to avoid annoying me, you know, when I get home from work, just have emptied or filled the dishwasher. That's all I ask. Yeah, you see the pain in my face. That's all I ask. Sort the dishwasher out, and I'll be a happy bunny. You know, if you don't, you know I'm going to come in growling like an unhappy teddy bear. So, you know, it's about those triggers, and it's about avoiding those triggers. So, you know, avoid the situations. Far more powerful than dealing with them. If you deal with challenging behaviour, you're just basically firefighting, and nobody wants that. You want to stop it from happening in the first place. Job done, right? I was the panel chair and keynote speaker at a conference Educated Yorkshire, which was loosely linked to the TV show, I understand anyway. And the panel chair job that I had to do was called Tackling Mental Health, Setting a Strategy. And it was an education conference, and basically what you had you had three other speakers and myself, and my job was to make sure everybody got their go at having their say and to direct the right people to the right questions. Now, let's look at the title of this: Tackling Mental Health, Setting a Strategy. I would assume most of us looking at that at an education conference would be talking about tackling the mental health of the young people, the children, the pupils, the students, etc. And that would be exactly where, that's exactly where I set out my stall for this event. But not having chaired a panel before, and I can tell you it's very difficult, I wasn't very good at it. And so what actually happened was the dish kind of ran away with the spoon, really, and what happened was that the panel got out of hand and the audience was kind of controlling the thing. And so what that meant was that the actual thing, the conference changed, or the talk changed, from tackling the mental health of children to tackling the mental health of the adults that work with them. And so that was really interesting to me, because actually before we can tackle the mental health of the pupils in these schools, the first thing we've got to do is look after ourselves and look after our colleagues and our friends and the people we work with. So tackling mental health, before we deal with anything else, we tackle that of the people that we work with, the children. You cannot feed from an empty cup, can you? So that's what we're talking about. Now, one of my fine sons lent me a laptop. Now, this particular young son of mine lent me a laptop. It was I said, son, my laptop's in the menders, have you got anything I can use? He said, yeah, he said, he's got a really good one. So he lent me a Windows 98 laptop. Can you remember those? Like that. Big thing, big wide thing with a screen that big in the middle, and and I said, you sure about this? I'm sure, Dad, it's a good laptop, you'll enjoy it. So the first word I typed into this laptop was well-being. And well-being auto-corrected to bejeweling, which was kind of interesting. I thought, there's a good word. I'm going to keep that word, just for fun, by the way. One of my other favourite autocorrects is the town of Newark in Nottinghamshire. Newark autocorrects to nowhere. But there you go. So, bejeweling, I thought, I'm going to keep that. Let's build something around it. Because if we want to avoid challenging behaviour, we want to avoid the triggers, one of the best ways to avoid a trigger, presumably, is to put nice things in its place, good things. So, bejeweling, what I did was I thought about some of the things that bejeweled me throughout the previous year. And so, this is a little old now, but here are some pictures of my bejeweled life. So the top left-hand corner there, that's me with Andy Farrington. Andy Farrington organises the TEDx talks near to where I live, and we've built up a really fab friendship ever since I delivered my first TED for him. Next to that, that's me at a Macmillan coffee morning, and I was the only person that turned up. This is a good thing, because that meant that all those cakes are mine. So quite enjoyable there. And there's all sorts of other things there. There's a picture of me just under the bee being beautiful, and next to that one there's a picture of me with Hattie Hayridge, who played one of the people who played Holly on Red Dwarf, and as you can see, she's delighted to see me, so especially in my Captain Kirk Star Trek shirt. So there you go. You're in good company. So what about that? Could we do that? Well, I've seen this done in nursery settings, where they have areas of the classroom where, or the activity room, where they've got pictures of their family and them doing things and being on holiday. And I thought, that's a great idea. Could we put some kind of wall of positivity up somewhere in a classroom? Could we do that? Might be worth thinking about. So there you go, bejeweling. Something in the classroom to make young people feel better about their day. Be realistic, said the unicorn. Be realistic. When we're asking for people to behave in a less challenging way, we really need to be thinking, what are we asking those people to do? So here's a little idea for you. You get a child in your class and you're teaching this child, and the child is presenting with all manner of challenging behaviours, driving you crazy. What are you going to do? Well, the obvious thing to do is to try and stop those challenging behaviours. But what if you've got 50 challenging behaviours, 50 different things that they do? You're not going to do it. I run a dyslexia course, and on my dyslexia course, you probably go away from the course with about 100 strategies to help young people with dyslexia. But what's interesting about that is that if you went into school the next day with those 100 strategies, you probably would have no success at all. And you'd be better off to choose 2 or 3 things for that child to start with. So you might say, okay, I've been on a course, I've learned 100 things to help you with dyslexia. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to concentrate on getting our letter P the right way round. We're going to concentrate on being able to read in a straight line, and we're going to concentrate on finding out which colour overlay helps you best. 3 things. Be realistic, said the unicorn. So that's something we're going to be investigating today, and I would really like to go into that. Lucky sevens. Lucky sevens. The interesting thing about lucky sevens is that if you took the 7 areas most likely to cause challenging behaviour, they are these: social and emotional understanding, or lack of thereof; communication difficulties or differences; the rigidity of thought, or the lack of flexible thinking; sensory issues; attentional issues. Now that might be needing attention, seeking attention, or the inability to pay attention; impulsivity, impulsive behaviours; and hyperactivity. And there are 7 things on that list. Now, if you look at those 7 things, and some of you who may have worked with me in the past, or indeed may not have and just happen to know this stuff, if you look at those 7 things, they are actually the 7 areas of diversity in autism and ADHD. And what I'm going to say to you is, I'm not going to deliver you an autism ADHD workshop, but what I am going to do is say to you, those areas of diversity in autism and ADHD affect all of us. What I'm not saying is we're all a bit autistic, because we're not. What I'm saying is these are things that affect us all. And so to take that a little bit further, yes, of course they may have ADHD, they may have attachment disorder, they may have PDA, they may have autism, they may have any of these things. They may have athlete's foot. I'll talk about that one. But what we're looking at is it's those 7 things that are causing the difficulties. Why did I mention athlete's foot? Because physical problems, short-term physical problems, can cause you difficulties. So I thought what we'd do for fun, I thought we would talk about my feet for a while. If anyone's not interested in talking about my feet, you can fast forward a couple of... So, let's talk about athlete's foot, shall we? Athlete's foot and the effects of mental health and the effects of athlete's foot on mental health and behaviour, excuse me. So, athlete's foot. I don't know if any of you have ever had athlete's foot. It's a lovely forum here, you can tell me and nobody will hear you. So here's the way that athlete's foot works. I'd got one and I actually thought, oh, I seem to have a blister on my foot. Now, as you probably know, when gentlemen get a blister, what do they do with it? I think we should ask our editor. In fact, they're coming to get me right now. Our editor, what do gentlemen do when they get a blister, sir?
I don't know. I bet you popped it then.
I popped it. Yes. Anyway, turns out it wasn't a blister, it was athlete's foot, and I popped it, and then it went septic. This meant that I couldn't walk very well. This inability to walk then affected the gait of my body, and that actually what that did was to give me a bad back. This all coincided with being on holiday, a time when I was hoping to go for nice walks and cycle rides with my children and things like that, and I couldn't. And this put me in a bad mood. Are you following this? And this would then make me a little bit challenging to maybe live with. And so what you've got to think of is, you know, if somebody's got a broken arm or, you know, a crooked ankle or something like that, and maybe there's someone who likes to play football or tennis or something like that, then the athlete's foot or that, you know, that sort of thing can have a massive effect on behaviour. So just looking at that, just looking at what's on the screen there, we've got those 4 areas of diversity for autism, which I talk about a lot. Communication, social emotional understanding, lack of flexible thought or rigid thinking, and sensory differences. And of course, the one that we were talking about there was that rigid thinking. The rigid thinking was, I want to go on holiday, I want to go out on my bicycle, I want to go walking, and I can't. And so I've made these plans and the rigid thinking has kicked in. So, we've also, and some of you may well have done the modules on pathological demand avoidance syndrome. Now, the pathological demand avoidance syndrome is also governed by the same 4 areas of diversity: sensory, social emotional, communication, lack of flexible thought. But it presents in a slightly different way. So, PDA, pathological demand avoidance syndrome, is a type of autism. That's why it has the same 4 areas of diversity. But the interesting thing with PDA is it's a anxiety-led need to be in control. This means that sorry, excuse me, something bleeped. This means that challenging behaviour can come out of a lack of control. Now, I'm not going to go into huge detail because you have 3 lovely modules of PDA, or even 4, if I remember rightly, of PDA to look at. But what I will say is this, that person needs to be in control of their life in various different ways. And sorry, there's a Kit Kat wrapper flying across the desk because the air conditioning's come on. So they need to be in control. What's the best way to keep a person with PDA happy and contented? Is to allow them control over their life. And if you want more information about that, I refer you back to the PDA workshops. Communication. What about communication? Let's just pick on a couple here. Communication and hyperactivity. When was the last time you didn't understand a request from your line manager? I had an email, and this email was from a colleague of mine in Kings Lynn. Dear Andrew, how many days do you need in a year? And I thought, well, all of them, I would have thought, you know. Am I dying? Don't know. And so I emailed her back. I said, I'm so sorry, am I being a bit silly here? Am I being a bit dense? I don't understand. She emailed me back, you know, in a year, how many days do you need? So then I thought, this isn't working, this email correspondence, so I phoned her up. I said, hi, forgive me for being a bit stupid, but what do you mean? And actually what she meant was, because I am an independent contractor, that she was planning to do something similar with her life, and she wanted to know how many days I needed to work in order to make it financially viable for myself. Now, the interesting thing about that is I said, when was the last time you didn't understand the request from your line manager? How did you feel? I was saying, am I being a bit dense here? Am I stupid? Sorry, just tell me, because I'm clearly not. And actually, it wasn't me. It was her. Yeah, in those, it's quite often me, I can assure you, but in this particular instance, it was her. And so what you've got to do is you've got to consider that and say, you know, how does a communication breakdown affect behaviour? Makes you feel silly, makes you feel less confident about yourself. What about hyperactivity? When were you last hyperactive? Hyperactivity kicks in all the time for humans. We get very hyperactive when we're stressed. So if we have a child presenting with hyperactive tendencies, the normal kind of response that I see while I'm out and about is to tell that child off. Sit down, be quiet. It's not practical. In fact, we say to people, if you're stressed, go out on your bike, go for a run, climb a tree, something like that. Actually, I can't remember ever asking someone to climb a tree. Maybe I have, who knows. But what we're saying here is that hyperactivity, you've had your bank statement through, you've been to draw some money out of the bank, and there's nothing there. You go, but I've just been paid, where's my money? Hyperactivity will kick in. And so stress causes hyperactivity. We need to respond with empathy, not challenge. And that's hugely important. Okay. Other behavioural hotspots that you might get in the classroom. The first one is that range, the lucky sevens. I've told you that one. There could be gender differences. I've certainly had this issue where I've worked with children who maybe prefer to be working with a male or female. Gender differences can have an effect on learning and teaching, and changes to routines. And I know we're going to be doing some social stories work with you here, but changes to routines, lack of interest. If you're covering a subject that doesn't have an appeal to that child, then that can cause difficulties. Just being there, and I know at least one child of my own that of course I know my own children. I was kind of halfway between kind of, we make synonymous like now. One of my children, who I picked up from being ill one time from school, and actually they weren't, and his words were to me, I just had to get out of that place. Any others? I can tell you the biggest cause of challenging behaviour in the classroom, and the biggest cause of challenging behaviour in the classroom is bad teaching, not bad teachers, bad teaching. Put your hands up if you ever taught a rubbish lesson. Keep your hand up if that lesson was so bad you wanted to leave. Yeah? Put your hand up if you ever taught an amazing lesson. And keep your hand up if you thought, I wish Ofsted had seen this one. Yeah. We all have ups and downs in our teaching, but we also know that a poorly delivered lesson or a poorly planned lesson can have a massive impact on learning and teaching, behaviour. And we're not talking about a low standard of teachers here, we're talking about a low standard of lesson or a particular difficulty that you've had in one lesson. How do you build resilience? Do you bend? Do you break? Yeah? And so that's a good question, isn't it? Now, I think we need to bend. I think my dad had some kind of saying about a mighty oak and the wind or something like that. But he was right. You need to bend with it. You need to go with it. We need one person, at least one person, to stay sensible in difficult situations. Otherwise, you end up in the custard pie fight that we talk about in the PDA training. So here's our first little workshop of this particular session in this module. So this was given to me by a friend of mine who was a psychiatric nurse, and I've developed this further, and I've also developed this with hour boards. If you ever use hour boards, there is a link to them on my website. They've developed a board for this. Okay, so in the idea of this is, if you've got something on your mind, there are two ways of looking at it. Can you influence it or can you not? So we're filming this during the period of lockdown for COVID-19 crisis. Hopefully when you're watching this, it's all gone away and we're all back to normal again, whatever that is. But what I would say is, during this crisis, I remember a particular time where the schools were due to be parked going back on June the 1st, and I was fighting that I didn't feel that it was safe at that point. So I was putting that argument forward. Now, that was a decision by the government that was trickling down to the schools of this country that I had some influence in as a school governor and as a parent and as a trainer. I have influence in that. However, also during the COVID-19 crisis, I would be watching things on the television and you would get thousands of people turn up to the beach on a Saturday during a global pandemic. And I would be going crazy looking at this. Actually, can I do anything about that? Absolutely nothing. No, I can't. So that would be an area of concern. So I would put my June the 1st schools return in influence, and I would put my thousands of people turning up to the beach in concern. It's a concern, but I can't do anything about it. Okay? So that's kind of how you would do that. We have a third area, the future. This is, I've called it next week. You know, I've seen children in the most terrible states over being bullied, over exam stress, all manner of stuff like that. And actually, you know, even with my own children, I can remember saying, you know, I think you're going to do well in your exams, but if you don't, it's not the end of the world. We can revisit it or we can make a new plan. You know, but so many children get so worked up about this. And so, you know, there are certain things that just go away. Who here, watching me, was concerned in December, probably from October up to December, about relatives coming to see them for Christmas dinner? You know, oh, your father and mother are coming, I just can't face it. But they went away, didn't they? I hope they did. Most times they will have gone away. And that's what you have to think about. Some things just go away. Remember what George Harrison said, all things must pass. You want to see good behaviour, remember the power of modelling. Yeah, the power of modelling, hugely important again, that you give them the behaviour that you want to see. Be creative with communication. Don't just use your voice, use your body. Give them the body language that you want them to copy. Think about the words you use. Here's some really unhelpful ones. Be kind. Calm down. Anyone who's ever told a loved one to calm down will know how that usually works out. Concentrate. Be patient. This doesn't help. It doesn't give you the information you need. And so again, I think we covered some of this in the PDA workshop, but hugely important again to get your language right. You know, so for example, instead of calm down, please sit down. I'll get you a glass of water. Something a little bit more explicit. To reduce anxiety, I've discussed this. Physical exercise is hugely beneficial. I've recently, during the COVID-19 lockdown, I've taken to using my bike. It's brilliant. Get out of the house for an hour or so, and you know, just to get out there and have a ride around. It's fantastic. Really helpful. I found it extremely helpful. Physical exercise. It's proven. It's neurologically proven. A distraction. Doing something you enjoy doing. You know, okay, why don't you sit down, read your book, yeah? Or, you know, why don't you just have half an hour watching the shopping channel, if that's what you enjoy. So something like that. Excuse me, Niles, but I have news for you. Copernicus called and you are not the centre of the universe. By the way, I somewhere in my file of Google Photos have a picture of me next to a statue of Copernicus, and I put this online with this exact quote. Yeah, well, this is all about the fact that it may be about you. It may be you. It may not be you. I think we have to not take personally when it doesn't work out. If you planned a behaviour strategy and it's not worked, it's not personal. you just need to be aware of that sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and that the child doesn't particularly dislike you and hasn't got it in for you. But hang on, wait a minute, maybe it is you, and maybe you are the one getting it wrong, and maybe you do need to be working on this. So you have to reflect on this. It could be one thing, could be another. The thing with behaviour management is, like a lot of things, behaviour management is there is no hard and fast answer. You have to examine every case individually. Rather like meltdowns in autism. I do a workshop on meltdowns in autism. One of the first things I say is, before we go into this, I don't have the answers. I've got a whole pile of answers and every one of them could be wrong. So, just be aware, every situation is different. What's the difference between respond and react? We're talking about impulsivity here, aren't we? Impulsive behaviours impulsive behaviours can create difficulties. And I always say to people, which is the best? When we've got a nice big full room of people in the training room, which is the best, respond or react? And it's always, the teachers always go, you should respond. Think about it first, then react. Yeah? Really? How many of you have put your arm out and grabbed that child and pulled them back when they've been running out into the road or something like that? How many of you have been doing that? You don't want to be thinking about that, because by the time you think about it, they're squished. And so, sometimes react is the best thing to do. And so what I would say is, maybe that's something you can workshop, different activities, different role play things about respond and react. Okay. Oh, there we go. Stress. Stress causes challenging behaviour. You come home from work, you're in a stinking mood, you shout at your loved ones. Yeah, why? Have they done anything? Well, they might have done. But it's more likely you've had a difficult journey home. When children come in to school like that, and they're giving you all this, have they had a good night's sleep? Have they eaten? Are things not so good at home? Or have they just had a load of hassle on the bus? Or did they fall asleep doing their homework or whatever? Be more understanding. Be more understanding. Understand stress causes challenging behaviour. I'm going to give you my two favourite phrases. The children that need the most love, ask for it in the most unloving of ways. And all behaviour is communication. Two good ones now. Keep a journal. Seriously? Yes, seriously. If you can't work out what the cause of the stress is, keep a journal. Write down the times when that person is anxious or upset, and then you can find the patterns. Are the sleepless nights before certain events? And use these patterns to pinpoint the activities and situations that may be stressful. As a parent, a very wise old Senko did this for one of my children, and she worked out that it was on a certain day of the week that my son acted up in school. And it was really interesting, because then we looked at the evenings and we found out that he'd been to sort of 3 after school clubs in a row. He was tired. Simples, yeah? Simples. Take something out of the equation, or just expect him to be tired and a bit grouchy on that day and cut him some slack. Some of this is easy stuff, but until you've worked on it yourself, until you've worked on it yourself and investigated, it doesn't feel easy. It's when you start digging down. I'm gonna skip this slide, because I'm going to be covering this in the social story. So if you don't mind, I'll move on, because I wouldn't want to cover it twice. Some stressful situations are avoidable. Yeah, and sometimes you just have to do the stress thing. Okay, team games might be for some people. Team games some people might find that really, really difficult. I know as a child at school, I was dreadful at team games. I would always say to people, I'm no good at sport. Well, actually, since I've left school, turns out I'm really good at sport, but just those sports that involve non-team activities. So, you know, there's an answer there, isn't there? Find another activities that better fit with their interests. I like running, I like swim marathons, that sort of thing. No team thing going there, or not in the way I choose to do it. Learn how to cope. No. Teach children to know when they're not feeling great about themselves. What should I do? Take a break. Respect time out. If they want to get out of the situation, if they say to you, can I just have a moment? Can I go? Or I need to get out of here, or whatever. That's fine. Allow that. Accept that, and then you'll do really well with them. We want to be talking about lighting and colour. This can cause loads and loads of stress. Bright colours, busy patterns can have a distracting effect. Now, how long could you look at what's going on the screen? Most people say not very long at all. But, you know, then you have to say, well, how overstimulating is my environment? You know, nobody really enjoys clutter. So, you know, have you got it in an overstimulating way? This will create challenging behaviour. Even more to the point, are you creating an understimulating environment? Understimulating, the devil makes work for idle hands, right? The understimulating environment can make it like that. So, you know, you've got to get that balance right. What is the balance? Who knows? Different for every child, different for every environment, different for every year group. Anyone who says they got 20 years of experience, no, they haven't. They got 20 lots of 1 year experience, because every year is different to another. Are you overstimulating? Yeah. So I'm busy here, you know, trying not to be dressed in an overstimulating way. But, you know, people do it, and it doesn't always work. It doesn't always work for children. Maybe it does for some. But, you know, I would say overstimulation is equally as dangerous as understimulation. Smells. Does the room smell? How do you smell? We're big on smells, and I would say that one of the things that we try to do is minimise smells, you know. So I always advise people not to wear aftershave or perfume and things like that in the learning environment, because it can be too much for some young people, and very, very sensory for children with autism. Similarly, lots and lots of children with ADHD may have sensory processing disorder or sensory integration dysfunction. So think about how you smell. 11:30, the dinner smell. Dinner smell, huge problem in a lot of environments. Not a lot you can do about it if you're working in a small primary school, or if you're in a secondary school and you're next to the hall, or if you're doing your learning in the hall next to the kitchen. This stuff can cause you problems, and you know, there are things you can do about the dinner smell. If it's a nice day, you can go out. If you have, I'm not saying every child needs to go out half an hour before lunch, but you know, if you've got children who are very sensory in this way, it might well be that you take them out for a while. It might well be that you actually, I have actually done this. I've got 2 classes to swap places, so because they had one particular child that really couldn't cope with it. You know, they call it hangry, don't they? Well, guess what? Hangry is a real thing. Hangry is most definitely a real thing. And so what we do when we get hungry, our brain produces a chemical called neuropeptide Y. Neuropeptide Y tells you you're hungry, and it makes you agitated in a bad mood. So actually, that thing that we just saw, hangry, yeah, it's a real thing. It's an actual real thing. If any of you have ever given up smoking, that thing that made you cross while you're giving up smoking was the chemical change. It was neuropeptide Y being created in your brain. So, there you go. Be aware of visual distractions. ADHD, highway to hey, look, a squirrel. Yeah, visual distractions can cause problems. One of my favourite stories is a classroom where the teacher said, I can't get the children to pay attention. So here's a really great thing you can do, dead easy, while the teacher's teaching, go and sit down where the children sit. So I sat in amongst the children. Sometimes you make yourself small so you can see at their height as well. I didn't have to on this occasion. There's the whiteboard, there's the window, there's a tree full of squirrels. What's more exciting, squirrels or teacher? Squirrels every time, isn't it? So you have to be aware of this sort of thing. It's a big issue. So instead of telling them off for not paying attention, you've got to question, am I delivering something that is attentionally pleasing, or is there something else that's going on out there that's even more attentionally pleasing? So, it might not always be about you, but it might be. Standing, sitting in transition times. As a young teacher, one of the first things I learned was to be in the classroom before them. You've got to be there first. If you're there first, you've marked your territory almost. What you've done, you've stand in the room and they can come in. You can guide how that happens. If you come in after them, then the chances are challenging behaviours have already started and you've got to bring it down. Save yourself a whole load of jobs by being there. Where are you in the mornings? Are you greeting every child as they come in? That's a good one. Where are you at the end of the day? Can I ask you, please, to stay 5 to 10 minutes in your classroom after the children have gone home? Because here's what happens. You see the kids off and you leave the room. Yeah, they've all gone and you leave the room. Maybe get a coffee, you throw, you've been teaching all afternoon, and so you leave the room. At that exact moment, parent comes in with child looking for teacher to just check something. Can you see where I'm going? They can't find you. Everybody's getting agitated. Just spend that extra few minutes, so that you haven't got families walking around the school like it's the Mary Celeste looking for somebody. So think about that. A little bit about sensory and behaviour. Sensory, the most important consideration. Sensory has an issue, has an impact on everything. Nobody is in a good mood when they are too hot. Nobody is in a good mood when they are too cold. Yeah, warm and cool is nice, but too hot and too cold will put you in a bad mood. Similarly, if it's too bright, if it's too noisy, all these things will cause difficulties, and we have to be aware of that. And so I want to talk very briefly just about using sound in the classrooms. There was an issue some years ago where that it was suggested that playing classical music in the classroom was a good idea, that it helped children learn. Actually, this came out of a project called the Mozart Effect, which was, I believe, originally based on unborn babies. But they started this thing saying that children will learn better. And it wasn't even Mozart in the end. Any classical music going on in the background will help them learn better. It won't. It won't. It can be useful in certain situations, but actually, if you look at divided attention, most people with autism, most people with ADHD have got what we call single attention, and so which is they can concentrate on one thing at a time. So if we're doing a piece of extended writing and you're happily playing the march of the Flight of the Valkyries in the background, it's not going to be helpful. It's not going to be helpful because actually many of your learners can only concentrate on one thing at a time, and that might well be the music rather than the work you're expecting them to do. And then you have that confrontation with the child. Why have you done nothing? I don't know. Music was great. Music was awful. So what I want you to do, I want you to pause me for a minute, and I want you to listen for 60 seconds and just listen to what you can hear in your environment. Yeah? And then feed it back afterwards. So have that 60 seconds now. See what you can do. Welcome back. So I could hear the heating system in this room. I can hear the server on the computer. I can hear traffic outside. I can hear a colleague typing. I can hear all sorts of things. Yeah? Interesting. What did we just say? Single attention, divided attention. Many of your more vulnerable children will not be able to learn with other noises going on in the background. You need to know that. So, single attention, divided attention, this is a sensory difference. Yeah, you might want to call it multitasking, if you like. That might make it easier for you to understand. The inability to separate the senses. So, if they're listening to the flight of the Valkyries, if they're listening to that, then they're probably not doing anything else. So, and then we also want to talk about behaviour, fragmented perception. Fragmented perception I do mention in the first autism module, but it's worth knowing. We say don't run, please walk. And what we're basically saying is if you say don't run, they don't know what to do. If you say please walk, they know what to do. So fragmented perception is really important. The fragmented bit comes from we hear fragments. So we hear don't run, but all we hear is run. I don't really believe that, but I do think it's not helpful telling people what not to do. You want to tell them what to do. I want to talk about undirected time, play times, all that sort of stuff. Back to that thing from my grandmother, the devil makes work for idle hands. Yeah? And so free time, outside areas, very easily overlooked. Go out there, you got your coffee with your lid on. Yeah, you should always have your coffee with the lid, by the way. Believe me, I do SEN cases for the courts. You want a lid on your coffee. Noise and lack of structure, it's a hotspot, isn't it? Some children just don't know how to play. And so, you know, anxiety and confusion and isolation ensues, and yeah, it's just not good. So, and so that's something we need to be thinking about as well. Is that can we put in playtime activities? Can we get them doing something? Can we get them, you know, can you do organised sport? Can you do skipping games, football games, all that sort of stuff? Absolutely brilliant. Can you split coffee breaks so that maybe all the support staff are out there for 15 minutes and maybe come back to lessons 15 minutes late? It's all things that I've done myself, and it's all stuff that's been really helpful. So I hope this has helped you. You know where to get me. I'm always pleased to hear from you. Yeah. Your directed task, I want you to make a plan. 5 things that you're going to change just based on this hour's workshop. Let me know how you get on. I'll be really interested to hear from you. And remember, when things go wrong, cut yourself a bit of slack. Thank you for listening.